The invasion of Iraq started on March 20th, 2003. March 20th. On March 23rd, 2003, so still during the very first few days of the initial invasion period, on March 23rd, a long column of vehicles from the 3rd Infantry Division was driving from southern Iraq toward Baghdad when a maintenance company that was part of that big drive to Baghdad got hit by an ambush. And with the nation riveted to the start of that war, to what was supposed to be the shock and awe application of overwhelming force to start what would be definitely a short and triumphant war in Iraq, that ambush on the 3rd day of the war gave the United States of America our first made-for-TV Iraq War household name. The name was Jessica Lynch. She was a diminutive 19-year-old blonde, white female West Virginia soldier. But apparently beneath it all, she was a Rambo. On April 3rd, 2003, the Washington Post ran this front page story and photo of Jessica Lynch and told the story of her unbelievable heroism after the ambush on that day 3 of the Iraq War. Private Jessica Lynch, rescued Tuesday from an Iraqi hospital, fought fiercely and shot several enemy soldiers after Iraqi forces ambushed the Army's 507th Ordnance Maintenance Company, firing her weapon until she ran out of ammunition, U.S. officials said yesterday. Lynch, a 19-year-old supply clerk, continued firing at the Iraqis even after she sustained multiple gunshot wounds. She was fighting to the death, the official said. She did not want to be taken alive. Lynch was also stabbed when Iraqi forces closed in on her position, said the Washington Post. Sources also told the paper that after her rescue and her medevac, she was being treated for gunshot wounds and stab wounds. The Pentagon even managed to obtain night vision video footage of American special forces rushing into an Iraqi hospital to rescue her. The coverage of that rescue was unbelievably intense.
One of the most dramatic moments of this war occurred early Wednesday morning Iraqi time in the dark in Nasiriyah, the rescue of Private First Class Jessica Lynch of West Virginia. NBC's Kerry Sanders was with the 8th Marines when the first tip came in.
The rescue operation began with a fierce barrage from the 2nd Battalion 1st Marines, firing on Ba'ath Party headquarters to draw out Iraqi soldiers. That diversion providing cover so Special Operations Forces could drop into Saddam Hospital. Just hours before, a handwritten note had been smuggled out of the hospital and handed to a Marine with the words, "She's alive." The note gave the hospital room number where Jessica Lynch was being held. Within hours, Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, and Air Force pilots were executing a rescue operation. Inside, the U.S. forces found the Army Private First Class wounded, a gunshot to her leg. Military sources tell NBC News Jessica Lynch had been for several days at another hospital. In this room, her bloody uniform was found. It was torn, her name tag ripped off. Tonight, Jessica Lynch is in Germany, where she will receive medical treatment before heading home. Kerry Sanders, NBC News, Nasiriyah.
Later in this broadcast, we'll take you to PFC Lynch's hometown in West Virginia, where the celebrations still are going on.
Now to the heroic story of Private First Class Jessica Lynch, the POW rescued earlier this week. According to a report in the Washington Post, Jessica fought fiercely before she was captured. Even after she was shot in an ambush and some of her comrades died around her, she kept firing until she ran out of ammunition. One official describes her as fighting to the death. NBC's Dawn Fratangelo is at the Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, where Private Lynch is being treated. Dawn, good morning to you.
Matt, good morning. Private Lynch is certainly the most celebrated patient here at Landstuhl Medical Center.
Lynch and 14 other members of the 507th Ordnance Maintenance Company disappeared after being ambushed near Nasiriyah. Military officials say she fought, even while hurt, until she ran out of ammunition.
It was the first rescue of an American prisoner of war since World War II. And she was a hero. I mean, there was even talk of giving Jessica Lynch the Medal of Honor. Members of Congress from her home state of West Virginia put her up for the Medal of Honor, for the military's highest honor, because of her heroism as a POW. She was a megawatt hero. She was brought home safe. Her rescue was all captured on film. It just could not have been scripted better by Hollywood for what they wanted day 3 of the Iraq War to end up like. But it turns out it may not have been scripted by Hollywood, but it was, in fact, scripted. The ambush did happen. Private First Class Jessica Lynch was injured. She did spend 9 days in an Iraqi hospital, and she was rescued by American Special Forces. But the backstory of her heroics, emptying her weapon, fighting to the death, fighting through gunshot wounds and stab wounds, all of that was made up, as she herself said insistently from the very beginning.
When I remember those difficult days, I remember the fear. I remember the strength. I remember that hand of that fellow American soldier reassuring me that I was going to be okay. At the same time, tales of great heroism were being told. At my parents' home in Wirt County, West Virginia, it was understaged by media, all repeating the story of the little girl Rambo from the hills of West Virginia who went down fighting. It was not true. I have repeatedly said when asked that if the stories about me helped inspire our troops and rally a nation, then perhaps there was some good. However, I'm still confused as to why they chose to lie and tried to make me a legend.
Did you fire your weapon back, and did you kill any Iraqis?
No. My weapon did jam, and I did not shoot. Not a round, nothing.
Well, you could have just let it go and said nothing.
I could have, but I'm not about to take credit for someone or something that I didn't do.
Jessica Lynch was the first American prisoner of war rescued since World War II. She was grievously injured in that ambush. 11 members of her company died in that ambush and in the vehicle crashes that it caused, including Jessica Lynch's best friend, who died next to her in that Iraqi hospital in the next bed over. But Jessica Lynch did not go down shooting. There was not a bloody firefight and stabbing. She was not fighting to the death like that headline said in the Washington Post. Incidentally, that article has been disappeared from the online archives of the Washington Post now. You can't find it anywhere. It turns out that the group of vehicles that Jessica Lynch and her company were in, they were supposed to take a detour around the city of Nasiriyah, but they didn't. They took a wrong turn, or more likely it seems like they took a few wrong turns. And they ended up right in the city center. They were supposed to go around the city and not go through it at all. They ended up wrong turn after wrong turn right in the city center, undefended, in territory where the U.S. Army knew there were likely to be attacks or ambushes, and they just drove right into it. It was day 3 of the war. Should that rescue not have happened? Should Jessica Lynch have been left there? Seriously, is that what we think about these things now? Private First Class Jessica Lynch, star of the show of that rescue. If the heroics that the Pentagon made up about her didn't really happen, and they didn't, maybe the U.S. Special Forces who rescued her and the other Americans held in that hospital, maybe they shouldn't have bothered. After all, maybe it was sort of their own screw-up that got them ambushed and hurt and captured in the first place. Is that how we think about these things now? Is that how we think now about that rescue in hindsight, knowing what we know now? Because that kind of a case, that obscenity of a case that maybe some Americans might deserve to be left behind, that is the new cause célèbre on the American right now. That the American prisoner of war, the last and only one still held from either the Iraq War or the Afghanistan War, the American prisoner of war, Bowe Bergdahl, he did not deserve to be freed. That the U.S. government working to free him, succeeding in freeing him, that was a shame somehow because, yeah, sure, he was an American soldier, but he was a bad one.
Questions this morning of whether Sergeant Bergdahl was a deserter or potentially a collaborator with the Taliban. Even Pentagon sources confirming to Fox that many in the intelligence community had serious concerns that he not only had deserted his post, but that he may have indeed been working in some way with the enemy.
It's pretty clear that he's a looks to me like a deserter or a traitor or both, and why the Obama administration would give away 5 terrorists to get him back is kind of beyond me. Again, 5 Americans were killed looking for him, at least, and I think if anybody needs a phone call or some reassurance or some condolence, it's those 5 families saying, listen, we're really sorry we sent your sons out to get killed looking for this this traitor.
And that the one we traded 5 hardened terrorists for himself deserted, got 6 Americans killed. Why are we doing anything to get this guy back? He's ashamed to be an American. He calls America disgusting. He wanted to leave, so he left. He got what he wanted.
That is the timber on the American right today. As the country celebrated the return of America's only prisoner of war from the war in Afghanistan, the right decided to condemn the president for getting the soldier freed, and then to condemn the soldier himself. And now, in a special show of Class with a K, they have moved on to attacking the soldier's family.
It is Robert Bergdahl, the father, who is also engendering some controversy. He has learned to speak Pashto, the language of the Taliban, and looks like a Muslim. He's also somewhat sympathetic to Islam, actually thanking Allah right in front of the president.
Those with sources tell Fox News that in the executive branch, that they're quite baffled by the White House decision to allow the president to stand alongside Sergeant Bergdahl's father. He says he was growing his beard because his son was in captivity. Well, your son's out now. Right. So if you really don't no longer want to look like a member of the Taliban, you don't have to look like a member of the Taliban. Are you out of razors?
On the American right, in Republican politics and in conservative media, there apparently is nothing to celebrate in an American prisoner of war coming home after 5 years. Because look at his dad. He looks like a Muslim. The administration's response and the U.S. military's response to all of this has so far been fairly calm, but also pretty forceful. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff last night issued a statement saying, quote, the questions about this particular soldier's conduct are separate from our effort, to recover any U.S. service member in enemy captivity. And he wrote the word any in all caps. President Obama also spoke to the issue today as well on the first leg of his European trip in Poland.
The United States has always had a pretty sacred rule, and that is we don't leave our men or women in uniform behind. And that dates back to the earliest days of our revolution. With respect to the circumstances of Sergeant Bergdahl's capture by the Taliban, we obviously have not been interrogating Sergeant Bergdahl. He is recovering from 5 years of captivity with the Taliban. But let me just make a very simple point here, and that is, regardless of the circumstances, whatever those circumstances may turn out to be, we still get an American soldier back if he's held in captivity. Period. Full stop. We don't condition that. And that's what every mom and dad who sees a son or daughter sent over into war theaters should expect from not just their commander-in-chief, but the United States of America.
Should we try to get soldiers home when they are held prisoner? Or should we subject those prisoners and their worthiness for rescue to some sort of test about how they got captured and whether they were negligent or they left their post or they were incompetent somehow, or maybe they made a dumb wrong turn, or maybe they went down fighting, but maybe their dad has too long a beard? Do we leave no soldier behind in captivity? Is that an American value and an American military principle? Or do we leave some of them behind because some of them, frankly, aren't worth it, according to the Fox News channel? Yesterday and today, a political strategist who worked for the George W. Bush administration as a staffer and who for a time was Mitt Romney's foreign policy spokesman during his presidential campaign, that political operative has been organizing media strategy for a couple of days now to try to stoke criticism of this soldier who has just spent 5 years in enemy hands and is now on his way home. It's an organized effort now to try to organize opposition and condemnation of this man who's getting out after 5 years of captivity. Before this happened, you could not invent a hypothetical scenario in which this is the way it would play out. Before this happened, you would have laughed out of the room a would-be screenwriter who tried to sell you a plot about the freeing of an American prisoner of war being treated as bad news in the United States of America. But incredibly, that really is where we are now.
The heroic saga of Private Jessica Lynch, captured after bravely fighting till she ran out of bullets, shot and stabbed, rescued in a daring midnight raid that boosted morale in a country discouraged by a war bogged down in its third week.
She's been retrieved, and some brave souls put their lives on the line to make this happen.
But NBC News found the story of Private Lynch was not all it was built up to be. The ambush. The Washington Post initially quoted an unnamed single source, identified only as a U.S. official, claiming Lynch fought fiercely, firing her weapon until she ran out of ammunition, and then was shot and stabbed. No one from the Pentagon ever said on the record that Jessica had fired her weapon or had been shot, but a steady stream of leaks built a dramatic and false impression. An erroneous report often repeated.
According to a report in the Washington Post, Jessica fought fiercely before she was captured.
She's reported to have suffered both gunshot wounds and broken bones during her ordeal.
But doctors say Private Lynch suffered a head injury and broken bones in both legs and her back when her supply truck flipped. She was unconscious when Iraqi soldiers and the Fedayeen brought her to the hospital.
She was in a bad medical condition. In medicine, we call it a shock.
Dr. Anar Adi says it was clear in the emergency room Jessica had neither bullet nor stab wounds.
With respect to the circumstances of Sergeant Bergdahl's capture by the Taliban, we obviously have not been interrogating Sergeant Bergdahl. He is recovering from 5 years of captivity with the Taliban. He's having to undergo a whole battery of tests, and he is going to have to undergo a significant transition back into life. He has not even met with his family yet, which indicates, I think, the degree to which we take this transition process seriously, something that we learned from the Vietnam era. But let me just make a very simple point here, and that is, regardless of the circumstances, whatever those circumstances may turn out to be, we still get an American soldier back if he's held in captivity. Period. Full stop. We don't condition that.
Private Jessica Lynch was the first American POW rescued after World War II. The initial story that the Pentagon told about Jessica Lynch, about her actions surrounding how she ended up in captivity, it turned out to be a made-for-TV superhero story that Jessica Lynch herself was the loudest in pointing out that it wasn't true. None of that ever tempered the happiness that greeted the return home of Private First Class Jessica Lynch and the gratefulness that she was rescued and that she made it. This week, there has been a remarkable turn of political events in this country surrounding the return home of an American prisoner of war from the war in Afghanistan. It is now a deafening chorus on the right that bringing that American prisoner of war home was some sort of mistake, that the president should not have made the deal that he made to bring the soldier home, and that the soldier himself, under the circumstances under which he was captured, mean that the president and the country basically should have left him behind. Would have been better if he'd never been rescued. I thought, honestly, from a personal perspective, I thought there might be like one ugly hour of this kind of thing in the comment sections of the lesser blogs of the world when this story first broke. But this has now turned into a full-on 3-day uproar on the right that appears to be an official Republican action on this subject. This appears to be their new political cause celeb. It is an issue for them that is growing larger as we speak. I am flummoxed by this.